Hello, my name is Megan. I'm the creative writer for Venture Magazine here at Kadena Air Base. Today we have the opportunity to meet with local group Natives in Okie here at the Kadena Library. So we're going to be hosting a question and answer panel with questions submitted by you to talk about Native American Heritage Month. We're going to start our panel today by having the members here introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shoshanna James. I am going to introduce myself in Navajo, my native language. Yad e anoto she e Shoshanna James yinishye. Clash che nashon do trodjini bashish team. Tatna zani dash che do tohana dash nale. Gut out dina sta nishle. So I gave you my 4 clans. I am Red Bottom People Clan, born for Bitterwater Clan. My maternal grandfather's clan are the Tingle people, and my paternal grandfather is running near the Water Clan. And in that way, I am a Navajo woman.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Gabriel Montagna, and I'll introduce myself in my native language. Gut Opa Gabriel S, or in Dene would be Yatse Abane Yatse Gabriel Montano Yinishe. And Echo Company 1180A from the Army.
Yad e benenshe arsanyo ardri nishe mai desh kijni nishle nanesh deje dene bashish chin ki ani dashnele tachini dashche akut al dene hastin nishle. Hello, my name is Arsanio Arthur. I'm with the 718th Civil Engineers Squadron, and I just introduced myself from Navajo.
Yad e benenshe Vanessa Arthur and Chia Tabaha Nishle Tojini Bashichin the Bethlehem Dashache Ashi Dashanele with Oz Sana and Shle.
Yate bena ana poyer tahani yunisha hanaga yunisha ashi bashishi naslana dashiche torachini dashanela. Hi, my name is Anna Poyer Tahani. My first clan is One Who Walks Around, born for the Salt People. My maternal grandfather is Lakota, from the Rosebud tribe, and my paternal grandfather is Bitterwater.
Yate Bennett Erwin Tahan Yinisha, Klashte in Nishle, Tachi Bashachi. Good morning, my name is Erwin Tahan. I'm assigned to Charlie Battery 1180A, also Army.
Anna, before we get started, you had mentioned to me that there are 4 tribes and it's kind of a matriarchy. Do you want to explain that a little bit more so we can understand how you guys all just introduced yourselves?
Yeah. So in Navajo way, we have 4 different clans. How I was taught is you look at your hand and you look at yourself as being the thumb, and then you have 4 that are behind you. So your first clan is from your mom's mom, and then your second clan is from your dad's mom, and then your third clan is your mom's dad, and then your last clan is your dad's clan. And each of these clans are mothers. So we're a matriarch. So in that way, I feel like we respect more. We understand that women and men are equal. Like, for example, when a man marries a woman in Navajo culture, he leaves his family behind to join the female's family.
Okay. And so there are 6 of you here today, and you're representing your group, Natives in Okie. Tell me a little bit more about your group and how many members you have.
We are just kind of like a group of people that we didn't, on base you have like the Hispanic Heritage Committee groups, and you have like the Pacific Islanders, and we didn't really have a group. And I think that's kind of what formed Natives in Okie, was that we had a collection of people that were Native, and we didn't really have a place to go, and that's how it was created. And it's kind of turned into us kind of just coming together and taking what knowledge we have and sharing it with one another. Some of us, like for me, I am an Army brat, so I didn't grow up on the reservation like most people, and I've kind of relied on people within the group to help guide me towards my cultural identity. And so it's kind of turned into us helping teach each other, but also teaching our children, so that when we bring our children back to our reservations, they kind of have an understanding of what's going on there.
Yeah. And so, like you mentioned, so you said you were an Army brat growing up. All of you here have connections to the military, clearly, because we're on Kadena Air Base. So tell me, is it hard for you to stay true to your ways and like to teach your children while you're here in the military and like with today's society? Are you able to like still keep your traditions close to your heart? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think it can be hard at sometimes, but I think for me and how I practice my culture, a lot of it is trying to let my kids understand who they are, where they come from, and having them be, because our culture is a collective, is collectivism. It's not like it's not individualistic. And when you come into the environment of the military, sometimes it feels that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of, I think the foundation of our group is making sure that we're all together and we're continuing to practice some of our traditions of helping one another out, or just kind of stopping in the morning, having coffee with one another. I think everybody has their own take on this that I think is really
Yeah.
interesting.
Does anybody else have anything to add to that?
All right, you can go.
Go ahead.
You can go.
Okay. Well, as far as teaching our children, we have 2 children here. Our children are 12 and 11, and we've been all over. We've been through. He's been through Oklahoma and Washington, and here the furthest in Okinawa. Our culture, our tradition is when a woman hits puberty, kinata ceremony. It's called a kinata ceremony. So back in February, right before COVID hit, that was one of the things that we traveled back stateside for, and that was one of the biggest thing that we did as a family, and that was our biggest trip back home, was to kind of keep our tradition as our tradition as a family, to go back home and to make sure our daughter had this ceremony done, because in our culture, as a woman, you have to be a coming of age ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And the kinata ceremony is a 7-day ceremony, so that it's a part of our culture to kind of keep that in mind. And for him in today's society, carrying a corn pollen every day, like Anna's sash.
Oh, wow.
She carries
Pretty.
it with her everywhere.
So I think for us, or for myself, some of it does translate over a little as far as being able to continue. So being in the military, obviously you got to wake up early and you exercise. That was something that we had to do growing up. So growing up, you wake up before the sun. When it's still dark out, you take care of the animals. You pray when it's twilight. So that's when they say the holy people are around. So kind of the same thing with the military. You're always up early, you exercise, you give thanks in the morning. So those sort of things come easy being in the military. But where we're from, we have, the 4 sacred mountains, and that's what protect us. So we don't really have that here, but we always kind of do that. So when you go back home, first thing you do is, as soon as you get within those 4 sacred mountains, you touch the ground and you say, "I'm back. Welcome back. Welcome yourself back to being at home."
Anybody else have anything to add to that? Is it easy for you to stay true to your ways while you're here?
I think, well, for me personally, I kind of like, as I grew up and kind of shied away from not shied away, but moved away from the res after joining the military. It kind of feels like over time I have trouble trying to remember how certain things are or how we did certain things, and I constantly find myself having to go back to try and ask for how we do things, or I just fall out of practice just because I feel like I get caught up in the mundane routine of everything. But I try my hardest to try and touch base and go back and learn whenever I can. My most recent trip was in March, just before the lockdown really hit, and every time I go back I always make sure to try and ask for help or say, "Hey, how do we do this again? How does this prayer work? How does this work?" So I think it can be hard at times, especially coming over here across the Pacific. It's not exactly, we're not working on the same time schedule either, so it can be hard at times, but I think it can be manageable.
Anybody else have anything to add to that?
I think he just reminded me, so because we are over here, sometimes it's hard to come by like corn pollen, blue cornmeal, white cornmeal, juniper ash, like things that we use in day-to-day things. And sometimes I have to have my mother-in-law send me boxes of things, and I'm always nervous, like, is customs gonna open it and be like, what is this? Is this like something that's not supposed to be here, and throw it out? So it's always kind of nerve-wracking when somebody sends me something that I need to move forward with my tradition. And it's also, you know, the postal service can sometimes be unfortunately unpredictable because
Yes.
life.
Yeah.
So some things like that kind of get me nervous, not knowing when somebody will have time to send me something that I need.
And culinary, like dietary, like food things are a huge part of tradition. So I can understand why that would be like a hard part of being unpredictable. But good thing you have people to send stuff back to you. So also in that same of like being in the military and how to stay true to your traditions, I know there were questions about men getting their haircuts. Like how does that play a factor? And it says, well, it says, why do you guys not get haircuts? That's the question we have. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, for women in Navajo culture, your hair, or I assume for men as well, your hair is an extension of who you are and your knowledge and the experiences that you've had. And so it's taboo to cut it off. But there's also other indigenous tribes, like the Plains Indians. If you do cut your hair, you have to make sure that it's like on a full moon, or there's certain protocols to do it. Or either in other tribes, or even like in Pacific Islanders, if somebody passes away, you cut off that hair if an immediate family member passes away, and it's usually the eldest, it's usually the matriarch of the family that does it. Everybody, I think, has like their own way of reasons and ways of why they grow their hair and reasons to cut it off.
Okay. Are there any benefits that you specifically received from the government, especially while you're here? Tell us a little bit about that.
It depends, like tribe-wise, or like what kind of treaties you have with the state itself.
Mhm.
For example, my pueblo specifically, we have a lottery, so to speak, kind of for like a scholarship program.
Mhm.
So I've always been asked like, hey, you know, don't you guys get like free college or stuff like that? And I'm like, no, not exactly. It's more that kind of even in the state, it's just like a raffle, and then whoever gets it, they're the ones that get the scholarship, so to say. Also, our tribe specifically does not have it set where we're getting paid actively for it or anything like that. So I don't get anything specific. But there are other tribes that do, smaller ones that you guys are talking about.
Yeah, there's usually some tribes that usually they don't have a reservation, or they have a really small number of members. Sometimes they get some type of stipend or help, but not all tribes do. Like for us Navajo, we don't get any money. We do have our own like tribal college, and we have scholarships that we can apply for, but those are kind of the same as like any other scholarship you would apply for. You have to have the grades for it, you have to write an essay, funds have to be there.
Okay. So what cultures and tribes do you celebrate here on Kadena, like in Natives and Oki?
Natives and Oki has about 16 different tribes represented. We have some Plains tribes, we have Southwestern tribes, which is what we are, and we have some people from Canada who consider themselves First Nations that are part of our group, and we have some Aboriginal members from Australia that are part of our group as well. I think it's important to open up the group to people who are Indigenous, because we do share a lot of, our histories are very similar in how we were colonized, that and some of our traditions are the same, so we have a large group of people.
Okay. And how many tribes are there, like collectively across like the world?
There are federally recognized 573 tribes, and then each state has their own state recognized tribe. So I think there are about 30 to 40 state recognized tribes on top of that 573. And each of those tribes have their own philosophies and ideas and languages as well.
And do you know what the oldest Native American tribe is?
I believe it's the Pueblo.
Yeah, so far, or at least from what I know, one of the oldest is the Pueblo a lot of ruins were found, kind of like built into the sides of mountains. I forget the name. There's one that's very popular. Like I think it's in New Mexico and in Arizona, I think as well. But like there's like a whole ridge and like a cliffside, and on the other side of the cliff there's kind of like a town built into the side of the mountain. So at least that's what I know.
Are you talking about Anasazi's?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Choco.
I said I couldn't remember.
Choco
the
Canyon.
Yeah,
Yes.
I remember visiting it, but I don't remember the name.
Okay. As far as spiritual and religious beliefs, what do you believe in? Is there a single answer to that, or is it kind of broad?
I think it's a very broad,
Mhm.
because with if you ask any other person on the street, what do you believe in? It's always going to be their own individual thing, based on their experiences and influences. So I think I would say all of us have different ways that we believe as well, but we have some foundations. Some of the foundations of those beliefs are similar.
Is it unique to your tribe, or do you think it's even more broad than that?
I think it would be like within each tribe, every single person has their own belief system.
Okay.
As far as like whether it's Christianity or, not believing in a God or being traditional.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else to add to that?
I would say it's a pretty broad, I guess you would say.
And
'cause
personal as well.
aside from just, like when I was saying, your own individual beliefs, whether you are traditional, don't believe in a God, or Christianity, there are also creation stories that each tribe has their own version of, or a different way of telling. Like my tribe's creation stories would be different from their creation stories, so
Mhm.
it wouldn't exactly be the same.
Okay.
And then even within our tribe,
Yeah.
we were having a conversation where some people, they say that in our creation story, we came from different worlds. And so some people say it's 4, and then we had talked about it, and in how we were taught there's 5. And so it varies as well.
Okay. And speaking of tribes, tell me a little bit about the hierarchy of a tribe. Like there's a chief. Like how does somebody become the chief of a tribe?
So I would say a chief is really just somebody who's in a leadership position.
Mhm.
And how you would become one, I guess that would be,
I would say nowadays it's more, we don't necessarily have that. We're a huge tribe, over 250,000 members, and the way we do it on the Navajo Reservation is we have just like a government type. So right now it's government, and then you have your own sections, just like a mini United States per se, and you have each little section.
So it's not familial. Like it's not like the son of a chief will later become a chief.
No.
But I would say back in the day it was more than likely it was like the older elders were the ones that were put in charge, So the ones that are famous nowadays are the ones when we were getting colonized. We were taught all the history on how we were colonized and where each group and where people hid. Like those are the things that we were taught growing up in our schools. So, but now it's more, it's kind of follows in line with the United States government.
And I think we pay, like, for people who are the legacies of those chiefs, we do, I think, pay them a little bit of respect, because it's kind of like they're proof of these people that we didn't get to meet but have made big strides and footprints in our history and culture. So I think that's why people automatically think of chief, but really when you translate it into even just Western society, it's a leader.
Okay. So as far as like other Indigenous groups, like do you consider like all Indigenous groups as Native Americans, or not so much?
So Native Americans were native to America. So like so anybody who was is indigenous to North America or South America, they could technically call themselves Native American, those indigenous groups. But I think we're moving towards a way where we're not really calling ourselves Native Americans, but we're continuing to call ourselves indigenous. We're indigenous people. You have First Nations people that are starting to dwindle into that indigenous. And I think by us calling us indigenous, we're able to connect better with people from across the world who are indigenous to these places that have experienced the same type of history that we have had.
Anybody else have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
So within tribes, or within, how many languages do you think there are collectively? Are there like multiple within like Navajo? Are there multiple? So like, is it kind of innumerable? Tell us a little bit about languages.
So I would say that every tribe has their own language, but I think within Navajo tribe we even have like different dialects as well.
Yeah.
Where like you could say one word in one state, and then you go to a different state and you talk in Navajo, and they're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for the Navajos, we run across Arizona, New Mexico, and even Utah. So if you go down, like, the farthest down south and go to north, and you have them talk, and you talk about creation story, or even the way certain ceremonies are run, they say, you have too many grandmas trying to tell you what to do. Like, no, it's not that, it's this way. So you have to, like, all right, we're just gonna do it this way because we're at this place, and we're gonna go around, because everybody has their own little ways of going about things. So it's kind of the same way with language. It'd be slightly different.
And it's all oratory, right? It's not like written language that you learn, or do you learn by listening?
We have it written now.
Okay, yeah.
We have our own alphabet. I honestly don't remember how many alphabets, but
We have
growing-
37 vowels though. I do know that.
so growing up, so like for us, we grew up on the reservation. So ever since kindergarten, first grade, we have at least one subject to Navajo culture, Navajo language. Each. So then we're taught that. So looking back on it now, it's like I'm thankful for it. Whereas back then you're just like, I don't want to do this, because you're living it, right? But there's a lot of stuff that you don't learn without reading it. But luckily now it's more all written down, and you can read it, and it is written now. So.
And so you learned as a child, and I know, Anna, you were telling me that you started learning more about it in your 20s.
Yeah.
Has it been a daunting task to learn?
It was really interesting. I think, so growing up on different military bases, I knew that I was Navajo, I knew that I was obviously brown, and I knew that I was Native American, but I don't think I realized what historical trauma was until I was maybe like 10 or 11. And I realized how and what, not just the Native Americans, but specifically my tribe went through during the long walk, and that kind of woke me up. And I wanted to ask my parents more, and I did ask my parents, and they tried to help me understand and learn more things as much as I could, but my parents didn't know that much either. And so it wasn't until I went to my tribal school, which is Diné College, in my early 20s, and I took a Navajo 101 class, a silversmithing class, and I took the Foundations of Navajo Studies and Foundations of Navajo Culture, and I learned so much, and it just sparked this passion to share with other people my culture and let them understand that we're still here. Because there were moments growing up where I feel like on different military bases it was like, I'm here, I'm still here. And I remember people telling me like, oh, I didn't know Native Americans were still alive. Do you guys all just live in teepees? And it's kind of like trying to, and some people genuinely don't know. I know people don't know, and that's the purpose of all this, is to let people know and share them and expose them to Indigenous people, so that when they do meet somebody, they can appreciate them a little bit better and expand on what they know.
It's interesting you bring that up, because there was a question someone had about horses being the main source of your transportation on like your native lands. Is that stereotype? Tell us a little bit about that.
I would say that sometimes that is true. Shoshanna was telling us last night, if you want to share about the horses.
Oh, so when I saw that question, I thought about my great grandma and how when they would go sheep herding, like my dad, for example, he's a sheep herder. He would say that he walked everywhere, but I know he probably used the horses too, and I know for a fact that was one of probably the main transportations when they would go out looking for the sheep, that they would use the horses. So, and I know another way the horses are a big part of our culture, as far as like ceremonies that they have, and like a traditional wedding, the groom rides out with on a horse. So, and I think they could probably tell you more about that.
Okay, anybody else have something to add to that?
Yeah, so for the horses, we have like horse songs, and they're sacred to us. We also, as she was saying, we have other ceremonies. So
Nda.
yeah, the Nda, it's called a squaw dance in English, and that one is like so most of the time happens when people go to war. So like a lot of the veterans. So when my dad retired, he went to war to both wars, Afghanistan and then Desert Storm. So he's seen some stuff, right? So to get rid of all the PTSD and wash all that stuff away, they have that ceremony, and I think it's probably one of the biggest ones that we do have. So you'll have 20 huts next to each other, all these different families cooking, and it's a really big one. And you'll have up to like 50, 60 horses, and you go from one place to another, and that's just to kind of cleanse them, so they're done with the military, they're no longer in war, and that's one way. But the horses definitely still relevant. Everybody, for the most part, tries to have horses and do have horses back at home. That's one thing. I've just seen on Facebook that there's a group of people riding horses to the voting ballots to vote as yesterday. So like that sort of thing, they're all dressed up. Some of the grandmas, they're dressed up, fully decked out like these guys.
Yeah.
They're 80, 90 years old going to the polling booths to go vote. So
On horseback?
well, not the grandmas, but
Oh.
some of the younger ones.
Adding to the horse, I grew up on the reservation. I went to a boarding school, Kindalachi boarding school. It translates to Kilichi boarding school. So on the weekends, on Sundays, my grandfather, that was our only form of transportation. I lived with my grandparents growing up, and we all lived in one household. My grandfather had a horse, and I remember he would always take me and my sister back on the back road on our horses with our backpacks on, with our clothes in the back, and that's how we got to school every Sunday. So that was our form of transportation sometimes, and I always look back on it a lot of the time, because when that question came up, I thought about a lot of that. And my grandfather used to work on mini farms, Arizona, and a lot of the time he used to ride his horse, because we didn't have transportation back then, and we didn't have electricity until I was in high school. So that horse question, it did resonate with me a lot, just because I grew up there, and we didn't have a vehicle until I was later on in life.
So talking about your lands, I know it's a pretty decent big topic of debate right now with governments encroaching on your ancestral land. How do you deal with that?
So we had discussed this earlier as well. They every so often, maybe monthly or weekly, depending on if there's a topic at hand, we're in our community, we have chapter house meetings, and you're kind of assigned a chapter house, and we have like kind of like government, there's like a chapter house president, vice president, and they talk about the issues. And so a way that we've tried to be involved with stuff like that, and understanding how, like, if an industry or something wants to buy part of the land, you have to be more involved in all of those. And sometimes I think goes into like the first question that we had. It can be difficult having to do that and be involved in our community from being this far away.
Anybody else have anything to add to that?
Well, each tribe, from how I was taught, we have treaties with the states, right? And occasionally, like for my tribe, for instance, we have a certain amount of land that's allotted to us, and that we use for different kinds of housing or recreation centers and things like that. And occasionally, the closest town next to us happens to be, the name is Algodones, and they want to kind of build outwards towards, to make more room for the town. But it also encroaches on our land. And per the treaty that we have, we're allotted this land, and the land is not supposed to be, that treaty is not supposed to be broken. But regardless, against the treaty, they kind of still push and take more land. So it's kind of like a constant ongoing issue as both societies kind of grow. It's like we want to use what was given to us, what was already ours, but the government wants to use more land, but it's against the treaty, but they'll just kind of do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you have to be more like a council member to understand more about that, but a lot of these things do happen. You see it a lot in kind of like today's news. You hear about like pipelines being built through reservations or through different burial grounds or things like that, where there are treaties that say you can't do that, but they still do it anyway.
And being here, does that make it harder, like seeing things going on back at home, or is there anything that you wish you could do different to help?
I mean, for me personally, I try to be as vocal as I can while also trying to like be within certain guidelines on what I can and cannot say, since I do work for the government.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like a weird dichotomy as well, being that I do work for the government while also seeing the government do things like that to different tribes or Native Americans. So it's like within me there's like a constant tug and pull, I guess, on what I want to say and what I want to do versus what I am doing and what I can't do.
Anything else? So I know, like in elementary school, a lot of kids are taught about some big names in your history, like Squanto, Pocahontas, Sacagawea. Do you guys want to tell a little bit about them and their stories, or how they've maybe impacted what kids are learning about Native American history right now?
So like Squanto, there's a lot of things like, I mean, for even us, I feel history doesn't do, they try. I know they try, and I hope that they're coming from a good place, but they're trying to cover Native American culture. But there's just so much to cover that I feel like some of the stuff that, as far as like Indigenous people who are big, sometimes I don't know all of it, so I had to learn it myself too. Like Squanto, he was I guess he's mainly known for being the liaison between the Mayflower and the tribe that he came from. And so he's also known for helping them create their settlement. So without Squanto, there wouldn't have been a Mayflower settlement. And I think like, I want to say the 1600s, I may have that date wrong, they did steal him from the land and they took him to Spain. And then later on, he met Pocahontas when she left the United States as well.
I read a book about it. It was called Squanto's Journey, and they did, but they also kind of romanticized it as well. And so I know that's something that you guys are probably dealing with too, is like reading like the romanticized version of Indigenous people like Squanto.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely with Pocahontas, we kind of see that a lot. And that had come up because we were asked to pick a film for Film Friday. And, you know, people who don't know the background of it, they would be like, oh, Pocahontas. But, you know, when you learn more about it and what was going on, it's kind of like, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why, well, actually my husband was researching that a little bit more, and he was telling me more about the reason why people liked the idea of Pocahontas.
Yeah, well, the reason why they liked Pocahontas was because they liked the way, like, white society liked it, because Pocahontas favored the settlers more and favored Christianity, learning more about Christianity than her own culture. And
so they used her as kind of like this person, like, see, she doesn't believe that you should convert. I in my opinion, that's kind of how I see how they used her.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the movie is definitely not like how it was. She was 10 years old. She wasn't a grown woman. So I feel like that's something that nobody ever really talks about either.
Mm-hmm. And then the film that Film Fridays did choose is Big Brother, and you feel like that's more accurate, or at least tells a better story?
Well, Brother Bear, I think it's just an underrated kids movie that was just amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Favorite as a kid.
Like the music that they put in there is just, it's amazing. But what I liked about it was that at the beginning it starts out with the Inuit man telling a story to these kids about the past, and at the core of I feel like at the core of every tribe, we're storytellers. That's how we teach each other. That's how we learn our stuff. It's all oral. We talk about it. And I liked that movie a lot too because it's something that's like they get a taste of it. Everybody gets a little taste of the beginning of a language and how a culture is, and they do, for the most part, I think, accurately portray the idea of how Inuits believe in their spirituality being associated with the Northern Lights. I also like it too, I think the beginning is just what gets me because, like, we are storytellers.
Does anybody else have anything to add to that?
I think that's one of the more positive when it comes to like identities, talking about like if you were to take like Pocahontas versus like Brother Bear, I think Brother Bear gives off like a much more positive idea or kind of like people to look up to, I guess you could say. Like as a kid when I watched it,
You
I was
saw
like,
yourself
represented in it, yeah. And it was like, wow, this is and when you tell other people like, hey, have you seen Brother Bear? What is that? What do you mean? What is that?
Guilty. I haven't seen it yet, and I feel really bad about that. But I'm saving it for Film Fridays so I can see it and like enjoy it with all the kids that are there. So I'm very excited about it. So tell me, what is Vision Quest?
So we all have different ideas on a vision quest.
Okay.
We have Pueblo here, and we are all Navajo. And in Navajo ceremonies, we all have traditional Hogan ceremonies, and we also have the universal peyote meeting. Peyote meetings are all held in teepees, and teepees came from the Lakota people. The Lakota taught a few other tribes, and now it's a universal ceremony that all the tribes around the United States come to pray together, and it's all used for all of us to come and help one another and pray to one another and sing with one another. So for us, we talk about for women, we have beauty way ceremonies, and for men, we have it could go for both ways for men and women, a beauty way ceremony, and that's just to kind of figure out where we are in life. And for men, like my husband was talking about earlier, he was talking about when men come back from war. My mother was telling me about when my brother came home from Afghanistan. He had the ceremony, it's called what did I say it earlier? I had it in my head. Kekashchin. So the ceremony takes place at the foot of this cleansing ceremony. Starts at the foot and goes up, and it basically takes everything that's bad out of your body, and it cleanses your body from all of the negativity that you carried over from all of the negative things that you saw, heard, felt, smelt, just everything. And those are things that similar to a vision quest, and it puts your mind back at ease and things that you want, all of your goals, all of the things that you seek in your future. So that's what I would want to answer that question to. And as far as a black ash ceremony,
Yeah, there are a lot of different ceremonies. Like when we first came here, we had to have before we left the four corners, we had to have a blessing way ceremony, which was kind of a way of like letting, like a way of protecting ourselves. And it was like a day long ceremony, kind of like a day long ceremony.
Yeah.
And it's when you do it, it's kind of as a form of protection, so that when you come back, you have it done again. There's also other ceremonies like the black ash ceremony. So like if somebody experienced like a death, or they would have black ash put all through them. And there are ceremonies for not just when you come back from war, but when you leave to go to war. You have a warrior way ceremonies to put you in that mindset to understand the reason why you're going there. And then when you come back from where you're going, whether it's war or like on deployment, you have it again to take yourself out of that mindset so that you understand your family is first.
Anything else?
And we have like, for example, we have in my pueblo we have a feast day, And for the feast day, we have dancers and we have singers for the whole thing. And if you're a dancer in my tribe, prior to that, since our main one is in May, in January, each household gets picked for who's going to have like a dancer represented for their family in the ceremony. And then we have like a peninsula deep inside of our village where they take all the dancers, and at the top of the peninsula is where you learn how to dance, and they teach you like the songs and what's going to happen. And they're gone for like a month or two, and then they come back down off like the top of the mountain, and we have our ritual.
Okay. We have time for a couple more questions. Another one that was asked were, do you celebrate Thanksgiving?
Yeah, I do celebrate Thanksgiving. I kind of don't want to exclude my children from what all other kids are celebrating. I am trying hard to share with them what happened in the past and like their connection to it. And I want them to make that decision for themselves whether or not they want to continue. But I think for the most part, we all kind of see it as an excuse to get together and have fellowship.
And do you incorporate some of your own family traditions into that as well?
I think we would I think that's the time that we kind of like, if we, like for example, my mother-in-law sent me a bunch of steamed corn stew, and that's kind of hard to come by. For like Thanksgiving, I'll make that, and we'll come together and bring like traditional foods that we don't make every day because we're kind of stingy and we kind of want to save it for a day. And then we kind of come together and we share that.
Yeah, and it's also a time for us to come together and share our kids. Our kids all have different. We know our kids are gonna be together, so we know that our kids are gonna play games together and things like that. Like during the winter season, there's also the string games, and the first snow just dropped back on the reservation right now, and there's a ceremony that we're supposed to be doing when the first snow drops, and we're supposed to be rolling our kids in the snow and putting our bodies in the snow and things like that, and taking out the shoe game ceremony, and then the shoe game, and then we're supposed to be doing string games. And those are things that we're kind of looking forward to now that the winter is coming.
Well then, so me, as not someone who is Native American, what can I do to support the Native American community, or what can I do to support like Native American Heritage Month?
I think looking up some resources that the library has provided, the books that the library has out, and kind of just getting associated and understanding how many different tribes there are, that we all come in different shapes and sizes, have different backgrounds and languages, and we also have a lot of different influences. You know, there's some in First Nation people, you know, they're up there like in Quebec, so they have like French influences, where like for us in the Pueblo we have like Spanish influence. We all have different things that make us who we are, and I think trying to understand that and wanting to know, and just knowing that and expanding your knowledge of what you know now is a big support.
I think just asking that question when you see it. So I think one unique thing is the amount of Native Americans that actually join the military is a lot compared to the average, right? For an example, one of my friends from high school lived a mile down the road because she joined the military, met somebody, and they were stationed out here. So like somebody I grew up in high school, meeting them 10 years later down the road, you know, all the way across the world is unique. But for Native Americans, the percent that join the military is really high. And the way we see it is we do that so we can protect not only the U.S., but to protect our way of life back at home. So we join the military for maintaining that way of life back at home, and not just the United States. Yes, for the United States, but we're also a part of that. And that's one thing I think is really high that a lot of people don't know about. The languages, they use the different languages in World War I and World War II. You know, for us, you come here, you can look up the Navajo code talkers, and our language was used to help win World War II here in Japan. So like not many people know those sort of stories, and it's not just us, it was other tribes that they used in prior wars too.
Yeah, there were 12, altogether there was 12 different tribes that were code talkers. And in World War II, they do talk a lot about Navajo code talkers, but they were, here in the Pacific, where the Navajo code talkers were used. But in France and England, they used Lakota code talkers. And, you know, they did that during, I believe, if I may be wrong, but I think for the most part, when the code talkers did sign up for the Marine Corps and for this program specifically, I don't think we even had citizenship at that time. We weren't even allowed to vote. And you had a group of these young men who were signing up to help out any way they could, because they knew at one point, you know, our land was taken over, and they realized we're not the only ones in the world. We have to defend our own. And so that's why a lot of people join, especially Native American women. Native American women are more likely than any other race to join the military. You'll see more Native American women joining the military than any other race. And I think that's also stems from a place of protection. And I think it's a really good thing that you brought that up, because I feel like a lot of people don't understand that. Because I feel like last year when I did this, it had a lot of people like, oh, I know somebody who's in the military, it's Native American. I know somebody who's in the military, it's Native American. And I think not a lot of people recognize that or see that.
Yeah. Did you have something else to add?
You were talking about what you can do to also help. You can also look into certain programs that are currently active. One really big one is missing murdered Indigenous women. I don't think people realize how more likely Native American women are to be like kidnapped or sold into slavery or a sex trade than other ethnicities. Actually, from what I do know, I think it's gotten to like such a degree that our current president tried to put in some kind of bill to try and even help with that. I don't think it's talked about nearly as much though, and I think if you want to do more, that's a program that you could look into as well.
And I think another way that you could help is just to be knowledgeable in like certain stereotypes that other people can kind of place on Native Americans, and just ask questions. I know one thing that I do in my unit is teach them my language, teach them Navajo. And they enjoy learning, you know, it could just be like little words like good morning, you know, yat e bene. So yeah, that's one way that I help people who are asking me questions and who want to learn more.
So ask questions, come from a good place.
Yeah.
We are grateful that you were able to watch this question and answer panel with us here today. If you have more questions about Natives in Okie, they are on Facebook. Look them up at Natives in Okie. Also, we will be talking more about an in-person panel that they're going to have at Keystone Theater later this month. So if you have questions about that, please be sure you're following Kadena Library on Facebook or the Kadena War Support Squadron, and we'll have more information for you. Thanks for watching.